All right, well, good afternoon. Welcome to the dormant wood cutting propagation that we do here during the wintertime at Juniper Level Botanic Garden and Delights Nursery. Today we're going to be covering just 3 quick cuttings you can do at home. And we're going to cover a couple things like the different rooting hormones and the substrates and medias that we actually use on a regular basis. Okay, well, we'll start by going over some of the hormones, the benefits, and that sort of stuff. Whenever we're floating cuttings, I'm using a water-based rooting hormone put out by Dynagrow. It's KLN. I like this as a floating hormone. Like I said, it's water-based. You can also water in your freshly rooted plants with that product. As far as bang for the buck, Dip and Grow is probably the cheapest, but you have to know how to mix this. There are different ratios. It's alcohol-based, so I have seen hormone burn on plants, and they also come with a diluting gel that will turn it into a base that will not break down. Once it is mixed in, it will gelatinize, kind of like the Dynagrow's rooting gel.
Smells lovely.
Yeah, this is a great gel. I use this. It's a nice combination of NAA and IBA3. It's a comprehensive gel that works really good. We typically use this for more difficult stuff to callus, or we want a good quick callusing on. We'll use it on Edgeworthia, some of our Baptisia cuttings, and a few other things that might have a little bit more difficulty with. The next that we use are the Hormodin products. There's a 1, 2, and a 3. The 1 is the lightest concentration. It's good for soft material and that sort of stuff. 2 is slightly stronger. And then 3 is primarily what we use on everything. For us, time is money. I've never seen any negative or adverse effects to using the Hormodin 3 on any product ever. So that's pretty much our go-to. So as far as like expenses go, I've seen cuttings get down to about $0.01 each with the Dip and Grow, but you have to know what's going on. These talc products you can stretch really, really well, and they will last you a jar like this for a home gardener multiple years. As long as you keep it in a cool, dark place like a refrigerator, that's where we store all of our stuff. All right, that's the rooting hormones. Now we'll talk about a couple of the different supplies that we use. As far as what to stick your cuttings in, we use a bunch of different cell pack sizes. These are little band pots that they do a lot of woody production in. They have exceptional drainage. For some of the larger size cuts like in Edgeworthia, you can see that the rooting is really nice, and it's actually rooting in before these buds are even breaking. So those are really, really cool. They come in multiple sizes, as you can see. So and these are all made by Anderson Pots out in Oregon, and they have a whole variety of stuff. These are all pots that we just simply repurpose from woody material that we buy in. But we use those on a regular basis. All right. Most of our cuttings, however, are stuck in a general 48 count cell pack or a 72 count cell pack. So 12 4-packs or 12 6-packs. Things that we need for everything, we properly label every cutting that we do. We put the name, typically a source, and the date in which it was stuck so you can monitor where it came from and who may have given you the product, how long it's taking you to root the product in. I've seen everything from popsicle sticks to mini blinds being used. These are tags that we can use that we buy in. They're not the cheapest. If you're going to use ink, we use a permanent ink. These are DecoColor pens. This is a permanent UV safe pen. They're not cheap, about $4 to $5 each, maybe even a little bit more, but they do not fade in the sun. A Sharpie or something like that will definitely lose all the information you've written down. If you don't want to buy anything, number 2 pencil works really, really good and definitely does not fade at all as well. The first thing we're going to do is Well, when we get into cuttings is we're gonna sterilize our pruners. Today we're using Okatsune pruners, a little bit partial to these, really good steel. This pair I've been using professionally for over 20 years. Just keep them nice and sharp and everything is good to go there. In the garden, you can use a Bic lighter. Here, we don't mess around, we just use one of these. And we will sterilize our pruners and burn anything off of them, any pathogens, virus, any sort of funk that may be brewing on there, we have just killed. We'll let that cool for a second, and then we're gonna start talking about our cuttings and what we're sticking them into. All right. At Plants Delights, we're using, I'll pass these around. This is our normal soil that we use. It's a potting soil made by Pacific Organics. This is a mixture of peat, pine bark, sand. Occasionally you will have coconut hull fiber, and that's pretty much it, along with 15% compost. Unfortunately, I don't know what the compost is made of. You want a handful? I was just gonna pass the bags, yep. All right. Our secondary product that we typically will buy in, this is made by Jolly Garner. It's the same formulation as Fafard. This is, once again, got a couple different elements in it. This is peat, pine bark, perlite, and a little bit of sand and vermiculite. So a really nice blend of soil there as well. We use that for multiple crops and cuttings. All right, now we'll get into sort of the substrates that are in all of these soils here. You can just set those over there, that'd be fine. So the first one that we use, if you're going to build a soil, is peat moss. This is just a screen peat you buy at the hardware store or garden supply center. That's usually the base for everything. This is a screened pine bark. This is what we use in the system that Pacific Organic gives us and Fafard. It's usually a 3/8 minus bark. It's really, really small. Another product, this is the perlite. Perlite is an exceptional reusable. It's a non-renewable, unfortunately, so I just sterilize mine and reuse it over and over. But this adds exceptional drainage and really, really lightweight. That's the benefit to having that versus our next. This is expanded shale. This is a product called Permatil, and we will use this in certain medias for additional drainage as well. When you use a rock, such as Permatil, just make sure that it's pH neutral so you don't adjust your soil's pH the wrong way. Things like oyster shell and stuff like that could have too high of a pH. All right, the last product that we use is an all-purpose sand designed for horticulture use, very fine. You'll want to source an all-purpose sand and not a play yard or construction sand. A lot of times the pH is off on those as well. So, all right, now that our pruners have cooled down, what we're going to do here is we're playing with dormant cuttings, so you don't really have a lot of stress or wear on the plants when they're like this. There's no foliage really to break down, so that's one benefit of sticking dormant cuttings versus all these plants that may have foliage, and you got to keep that foliage from falling off and breaking down. So what we do is we will stick usually about 4 to 6 inch pieces, and I just kind of work my way up the stem, and I try and make everything nice and uniform. The key to this is uniformity, so when you're growing things out, they should all be roughly about the same size, as you can see there. What we're going to do today is I'm going to take the bottom part of this, I'm just going to give it a nice little scar. I'll pass that around so you guys can see. It's a really, really, really light scraping. You don't really need to do anything too deep. The deeper you go, the more you open up the cutting to bacteria, fungus gnat larvae, that sort of stuff. So what we did was we use our regular potting soil, and what we're going to do here is, since we're using a gel, we will pre-dibble a few holes in the soil so when you go to stick it in the pot, it will not rub off.
And perhaps we'd like to know which way is up. How do you tell which way is up?
Well, you have to study the nodes and make sure that you have the bud on top of the node. That's a golden rule for every cutting that you'll do. All right. Now we're just going to stick those in there like that. And this we're going to give a nice good coating. Like that. It's going to go in the pot. And you can stick multiple cuttings in a pot if you're worried about space. Here we typically just do one per pot. The reason we do that is basically you have ununiform rooting that goes on, so I can pull these out individually as they root instead. All right, and once we have that, we're going to take that to our greenhouse and we will water those cuttings in. We will label those as Edgeworthia and stick them Chrysanthemum and today's date. 24. All right, and then you'll put that in your pot so you know what you have, and just kind of watch over the next few weeks for additional rooting. This takes about, to get this size root, you're typically going to get about, I would say those were stuck at the end of January, around the 21st, I believe. So you can see how the roots will develop a lot of times first, and then they will start to sprout their buds. So that's kind of a nice thing. You don't have that stress on the foliage. A lot of times with these dormant wood cuttings, they will start to break dormancy as they are rooting. And sometimes it happens actually a little bit beforehand. So the next cut we are going to talk about is Tamarix. Disclaimer, I do not promote this plant anywhere out in the Mountain West. It's a noxious weed. Here in Raleigh, Zone 7, I've never seen one seedling or this plant moving around in any way. But if you are out west, I highly, highly recommend that you do not plant this plant. There's, I think that many of societies and groups are trying to eradicate it, so be very careful. However, what we're going to do here is we are going to stick a dormant cutting. These just started breaking about a week ago. There was nothing here, so we'll just pretend that there's nothing. We're going to take a cinnamon colored stick about that big, and we're basically going to just scrape it like we did before. And in this case, these root a lot easier than the Edgeworthias, so I just give them a nice little dip, like you're powdering a pastry. It's really, really fine. There's not much there, no need to waste a bunch. And I'm also going to use a smaller size cell pack, so we're going to stick that, and we don't have to dibble that in, and we're going to push that in. We're going to label that like we did prior. And today's date. All right, and that goes in the pot. And once again, once we get to the greenhouse, we will water all of our cuttings in so you get a really good binding around that cutting to ensure that when it does root, they have good soil contact and will take off. All right, so this is one that's a little bit trickier. This is our pomegranate trees. We're doing these as dormant cuttings because what happens is our greenhouse typically gets a little bit hotter during the summer months, and what happens is they have all this fresh foliage on them and it wants to defoliate prior to rooting. So if you can actually stick cuttings of dormant wood, you don't have to worry about all that foliage falling off and then having to wait on secondary bud growth. What we're looking for, once again, is a nice cinnamon colored wood, just like the tamarix. And we can pass that around. There's a bunch of little laterals on these things. And what we're going to do with this is we're actually going to stick what is called a heel cutting. And a heel cutting is simply where that plant is connected to the stem. We're going to simply just pull that off like that. There is a downside to using that cutting versus a stem cutting that is a straight or a tip. And the problem is that once I pull this off, I've wasted that whole branch or new sprout. What we're going to do is we're going to come in, we're going to cut, and then we're going to stick about 4 to 6 inch cuts. And where it gets a little bit softer, I'm actually going to discard that portion and focus primarily on the lower portions. So once again, this is our heel cutting where it was attached. The next section up that I cut, this is an actual internode or straight cut. And what that means is these are nodes where the buds are. The internodes are the sections in between. So what I've done here is basically cut in between the nodes on an internode, and that becomes an internode cutting. All right, we are going to scarify these, like scar them up like that. Not a scarify, sorry, wrong terminology there. We're just going to simply scar that, give it a quick dip in Hormodin, and once again I'm going to use an appropriate size cell pack. So in this case we're going to stick them in the 72 count cell pack. Once we have that, we label them, tag them, and what will happen is you can see that our cuttings that we stuck back in, this one's done in late summer. We were afraid that they weren't going to perennialize, so we put them in refrigeration for a cold chill and took them out about a week, a little bit over 2 weeks ago, and put them in a warm house, and now you can see the buds are breaking. So what would happen is your cutting would look a lot like this under mist or in your house, where it actually starts to sprout buds, and then you will have rooting that follows. In this case we stuck live cuttings, but I wanted to show you what they will look like a lot of times this time of year once you do stick them. We're going to come back through and we'll grab a couple more of these little heels, and I'm selecting the darker branches versus the lighter wood. I find that that is what roots best this time of year. And this is a great cultivar that we have called Russian Giant. This is Punica granatum Russian Giant. This is one we'll probably start to offer again here shortly, within a year. All right. So once again, you can kind of see what a cut cell pack looks like of dormant wood. We'll water these in, label them properly, and then we'll start to watch them for rooting probably within the next like 20 days or so. Cool. You guys have any questions or anything? It pretty much wraps up what we're doing here with our dormant hardwood cuttings and dormant cuttings. Yeah.
How universal or specific is that set of growth hormone that you're using?
This is very, very universal. IBA3 is, it comes in all sorts of different forms, from alcohol to powder forms, to water-based. They may come in different concentrations. There's also other forms called KIBA, where they have potassium attached to them, and that's also used a lot in our tissue culture facility as well. So, but they're all typically broken down or scaled out by the portions of strength. So, yeah.
How do you know what to use?
They're all sort of specific. You can use all of these for any of the cuttings that we've done. In my experience, like I said, this one is most likely the more difficult to use because it is alcohol based, you have to know the appropriate ratios. So something that is a hard wood cutting would probably be something close to like 3 capfuls of the rooting hormone to say 5 capfuls of water. If you're using something really green, like a salvia cutting, really soft, I would do probably 1 cap of hormone to like 10 caps of water. So it's all over the board. You kind of have to know what you're playing with. These are pretty foolproof. You don't get any burn or anything like that. I can stick any cutting in this. I've never seen any bad effects of it. You won't get any burning. For us here, time is money. So the faster I can get things rooted, the faster we can get them potted, the faster we can get them out the door into the customer's hands. Once again, this is probably one of the best gels I've used. I've used a lot of different varieties, Clone X. Yeah, there's a ton of them out there, but I find that this now it's all bought up by Super Thrive, but this is Super Thrive Dynagrow. It's a comprehensive gel, but a whole thing like this is about $35, $30, somewhere in that range, and you're only gonna get maybe 200-300 cuttings stuck out of this. I get a few thousand out of this, and depending on the concentration, tens of thousands out of this. So they're all over the place. But 1, 2, and 3, my propagation journal that I got in school for my classes, the professor actually was very specific as to what hormone he used for certain cutting. So, yeah, good question.
So I noticed you cut off the heel as opposed to just cutting off the cutting.
Mm-hmm.
I know we wanted the heel cutting, but then you also removed that part. So
Mm-hmm.
what is the reason behind that?
I cleaned that up just a little bit. I don't need, when I do a heel cutting, I don't necessarily want to have a big scabby portion hanging there like that. So what I do is I typically come in and just remove a little bit so it goes in. The other reason I like that heel cutting is all these nodes are stacked really tight within the bottom portion. So when you look up close, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 nodes within a 1/2 inch. So the more nodes you have at the base of the plant, that ensures you to have backups in case you have something go on down below. And also that will also help with perennialization of a lot of these woody plants. The other thing there I find is that this wound holds up a lot better than if I was to take a cut like this and use that wound. This has got basically a bunch of cells that are all stacked up. It's calloused, it's a little bit harder. You have those nodes, and if you look closely here, I'm only gonna get 2 nodes out of that cut versus this section here, I've got 4 to 5 in that same spot, so I've doubled the amount. So those will hold up a lot better that as well. So, yep, good question. What you got?
So you water these, you put them in the greenhouse. I mean, what conditions would we do? What would we do?
So at home, I like to use these Ziploc bags. If you buy like a gallon Ziploc bag, a lot of times what you will have is a capacity to hold 2 of these pots. This is the cheapest greenhouse you can buy. So basically we water them in, and I might zip it halfway type of thing, let a little air in there once in a while. Basically, I just want high humidity. That's the key to rooting everything. Water all your stuff in really good. Let it drain out. Put it in these bags, seal them up. Put them in a bright indirect light. That usually works best. A kitchen window that might be east facing or north side of your house. Nice bright indirect light. If you were to put them on the west side of your house or the south side, it would most likely burn up, get a little too hot. So at home I use those storage shoe boxes. I try and get one that has like a clear lid. And instead of using the lid as a lid, I invert the thing and use that as my bottom. And what I do with that is I will take a flat or just these sorts of things like this and set them in, and then just set the dome on top. And that will also create a humid environment. You can get really complex with them. You can set in like trays of bottom that like you get that hold water, elevate the cuttings up off of that and put bottom heat and stuff like that, so you create like this really hot, humid environment. That works really good as well. So
do you want these indoors or outdoors?
right now I would do these indoor cuttings. If you had like a little greenhouse or something outside, I would wait till like spring or summer to do those. However, Edgeworthias, you typically stick during the cool season to get the best strike rate with those. The tamarix we can stick pretty much year round, and the punica we can also stick pretty much year round. As you can see, those were done in fall. However, I like to do them this time of year. So.
But you want to keep them in a warmer environment.
Yeah, typically the ideal temperatures anywhere from like around 70 to 75 degrees is a prime soil temperature. And like I said, typically don't want them to go too much above that, and the lower you go, the slower they'll take the root. One other thing I will mention when you're sticking this type of stuff, the harder the wood, the longer it's going to take the root, and you're also going to need a much stronger hormone to root in woody stuff versus the soft tender growth. So that's another reason why we use the Hormodin 3 so much.
Can't use the wood that's too soft, right?
No, you can use really soft wood. You could take it all the way down to the softest little softwood if you wanted to. It's just a matter of the softer the wood, the harder it is to keep it from breaking down. It has more of a tendency to want to rot and stuff like that. So that's where we like to use that semi-hardwood that's been, it may be this year's growth, but it won't bend around your fingers. Softwood cutting will typically bend really easily around a finger. As you go down the stem, it's still bending, but it will also crimp, and that's about where you want to be, is somewhere in that area. So semi-hardwood is typically what works the best as far as like holding up and not taking a lot longer time to root. So good questions, yeah. What else you got?
How long, for example, that Edgeworthia, how long from when you stick it until you've got something you can plant out in the garden?
So I would say I would probably take a plant like this. This was cut, like I said, in the middle to late January. I would probably pot this up into a slightly larger pot before I would plant it outside. So I would like to see all of these buds starting to break, getting good foliage. And then at that point in time, we'll pot them up, grow them off in a larger container, and I would say you could put it out after your first frost. So if you were doing them right now.
So this year it would
Yep.
have to be, okay.
Yep. And sometimes, since I have animals, a lot of times these make great container plants. So I will actually grow them off in a container for a few years before I have a specimen that I want to plant in the garden. And what's cool about Edgeworthia is you can grow them in full sun or full shade. The one thing that they do like consistently is water, but you will get two different growth habits with the plant. So if you grow it in full sun, it stays much more compact and tight. You get a lot of good basal growth out of it. And the more shade you give it, the more structured and architectural it becomes, and will get very large and stretched out. And they're absolutely beautiful. They're topped with these beautiful yellow fragrant flowers right now. But it's a must-have for every garden as far as I'm concerned. Yep. So, good question. Oh, that? Here, you can pass the flower around if you want. So, yep, there you go. Yeah, any more questions? No? Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for joining us today. It's been a pleasure talking about dormant cuttings that people typically don't stick. We'll see you next time. Happy planting.